This year's State of the Nation address debate saw many opposition parties focus on the crisis at Eskom. The DA says the country needs bold, immediate action to reform the country's energy sector. It is also suggested that those who do not pay their electricity bills are named and shamed. For more on the DA's proposals, I'm joined by the party's leader, Mmusi Maimane. Good evening, Mr. Maimane. Thanks very much for your time. I want us to go through your set of proposals in the obviously short time that we have. The first one is that you say the president should reject pressure from the ANC's union allies who are opposing the introduction of independent power producers. But the fact of the matter, though, is that the ANC and the government is actually not paying attention to that. We have an IPP program which, from what one UCT academic told us last night, is actually a good one. So that one is not true.
Good evening, Vuyo, and good evening to fellow South Africans. And first and foremost, I think the IPP program that we've got at the moment is insufficient. Secondly, I think that if we're really going to be aggressive at independent power producers, then I'm afraid the president can't simply say we want 100% state-owned entities. It means those IPPs then come in and only sell energy to the same state-owned entity. Which business is going to invest in that space? We must split Eskom into two entities, one for build, one for distribution. Once you get into a distribution plan, it must be part privatized, because when you achieve that, you can allow independent power producers to come on board on a much more aggressive manner. This will allow competent municipalities to be able to come on board and purchase energy directly. At this point in time, the only place you and I can buy energy from is from Eskom. So it's like tantamount to saying, let's take an elephant, split it into three, and it will work better. It doesn't work like that. You need another elephant. You need another competitor so that municipalities can say, well, Eskom want to sell energy at 10 rands or 3.50 per kilowatt hour. We think solar energy can come in at 60 cents per kilowatt hour, and we can purchase directly from there so that we can on-sell it to the consumers at a much cheaper rate. So I think we need an aggressive plan. Vuyo, we're not making choices as a nation between good and bad choices. We're making choices from worse and much worse. And the ANC is incapable of acting on this issue because they're looking after their unions, which is understandable. But what we need is a South African plan, a plan that brings public sector, private sector, labor, and says all agendas must be surrendered. The only agenda must be South Africa. And South Africa's agenda says we need much better competition in the public sector. Otherwise, Eskom will plunge this economy into a serious catastrophe.
But speaking of unions, you are saying that the president must reaffirm Eskom's engineering and maintenance employees as, and I quote, essential services that cannot enter into strike action. But it's not the strikes, though, that have led to where Eskom is currently. What has plunged this country into chaos and darkness is actually the decisions that were taken by management and, of course, with the help of some senior government officials.
Well, I think we must clarify. One, when you recall the issue of the fact that it's not just management, it's the ANC government that made decisions that brought us to this point. We should have already split Eskom a long time ago. Secondly, the relationship of labor. Vuyo, every time there's load shedding, it's R1 billion to our economy every single day that we take a knock. You compound that by adding a labor unrest in the engineering sector, it means that power generation is severely impacted. As a country,
but that's not what
as the president, the one thing I agree with him on is that we're in a crisis. But it could be a serious risk going forward. The interventions I'm putting forward, labor is but one component, cost rationing is another, splitting the entity is a third part of the plan, allowing independent power producers to come on more aggressively is another. All of that is contingent on having a stable labor force throughout this period going into. We are having load shedding in summer. Wait until we increase demand going into winter when households need more energy. And if you have a labor that is already in a protest action, this could compound the problem even further. I'm acting as a responsible citizen saying we need all hands on deck at this point. Why was it unique that the president could say in December no one could take leave? And when I'm saying we need all labor and all hands on deck for this period going through winter to safeguard our economy, is that suddenly not seen as a very tangible solution going into a very deep crisis in our nation?
You are also asking the president, or saying, or putting forward as an alternative, an idea that Petro SA should be instructed to supply Eskom with diesel at tax-free cost prices to avert a crisis in the short term. Why should Petro SA, which looks like it has a business case, be killed because of reckless decisions that were taken by the people who are running Eskom?
We need everybody. Petro SA gives us an opportunity to be able to say, how can we provide energy and diesel, certainly to Eskom? We need all hands on deck. The cost of diesel is escalating, and therefore what I'm simply asking is that in the midst of a crisis, it is no use for that government to be deriving tax on its benefit. It could offset that and allow the stabilization of Eskom's finances. This is not just the only proposal I've made. I've also made a proposal that makes it quite clear Eskom's policy around where to procure coal from needs to be broadened to include every South African who is able to supply coal. At this point in time, we're tied onto Eskom coal contracts that only mean coal can come from certain sectors and not from other sectors. It's meant that the quality of the coal is not right, but what we need at this point in time is to allow anybody who can supply coal to Eskom to be able to do so, and so that ultimately we bring stability. Again, we are in a crisis. We need to act as a country that's wanting to put South Africans first. The more we surrender that agenda and simply say, well, let's look after that one, look after this one, every passing day, load shedding will mean joblessness, and load shedding means job cuts. That's all that sole project means. And the president today went going even further to say Mr. Mabuza must take control of the project is the greatest insult in all of this issue.
Now, you are also saying that municipalities should be instructed to name and shame non-payers of electricity. Can I dare you to instruct the mayors of Tshwane and Johannesburg tonight and ask them to do this?
Absolutely. Metros that are able to pay, they must pay. Metros that are able to procure energy must be able to do so. And I can assure you, the reason why a city like Cape Town works, that when we have stage 2 load shedding, they are on stage 1, is because they haven't only let themselves be tied only to Eskom. The next thing they went to do is include Steenbras Dam, convert energy on that basis, so that when the country is at stage 2, we're at stage 1. Herman Mashaba already has delivered a power station at 50 million rands cheaper, but also making sure the project is on time. So where we are in government, we demonstrate to the people of South Africa that we save them money and we ensure that we collect the appropriate revenue to pay. Municipalities that are not, mainly all of them in the Free State, have been under Ace Magashule, and we need to be able to collect revenue from them. And the only municipality in Gauteng that hasn't been able to pay its Eskom bill is Mfuleni. So I can assure you, where we're in government, we will collect the appropriate revenue, pay it over, so that we can ensure citizens have got energy.
So yes or no, will your mayors, where you are governing, instruct their bureaucracy to name and shame people who don't pay electricity? And I'm talking specifically about Johannesburg and Tshwane.
I'm talking collectively of municipalities. I'm not saying that we must sit down and put out a roll of people who have not paid, the list would be endless. But what you cannot change, Vuyo, is the fact that Ngwatu, Mfuleni, all of these municipalities have failed in their payment. You see, when the president says we want to help local municipalities reticulate better, or another company to be set up to reticulate, that is a mistake. Municipalities are tasked with the duty of reticulating energy. All I'm asking is that those municipalities purchase directly, and municipalities that cannot pay must be named and shamed, so that as the people of South Africa, we can hold those administrations to accountable. Because when those municipalities fail to pay, it's the citizens who suffer, not the municipality.
Mr. Maimane, thanks very much for your time this evening. The DA leader, Mmusi Maimane.